Ted Bundy is also the target of investigations of somewhere around 20 murders in the western United States, all involving young women.
I think I stand about as much chance of dying in front of a firing squad or in a gas chamber as you do being killed on a plane flight home. Let's hope you don't.
Today at age 32, Theodore Robert Bundy stood in a Florida courtroom and listened to a judge describe his pending death in the Florida electric chair.
It is further ordered that on such scheduled date that you be put to death by a current of electricity, and such current of electricity shall continue to pass through your body until you are dead.
On November 24, 1946, at home for unwed mothers in Burlington, Vermont, a baby boy was born with the father's name blank on his birth certificate. His name was Ted Bundy. He grew up thinking his grandparents in Tacoma, Washington were his parents, and his birth mother was his older sister. Before becoming an adult, he learned the truth about his birth. As a young man in Tacoma, Ted Bundy was viewed as diligent. Entering the University of Washington as a psychology major, he studied human defense mechanisms and trust structures. Starting from 1969, as a volunteer at the Seattle Suicide Prevention Center, over the phone, he repeatedly observed the reactions of people in crisis. In the early 1970s, Ted Bundy was seen as a Washington state Republican activist. Dressed in a neat suit, he blended naturally with local figures. His quick judgment and polite manner won the trust around him. Then, in 1973, his relationship with lover Stephanie Brooks ended. According to US FBI analysis, afterward, he began pursuing women with specific looks and backgrounds. In January 1974, the name Ted Bundy moved to the front of investigation files. In the early hours of January 4, 1974, a residential area near the University of Washington, Karen Sparks, then a sophomore majoring in accounting, was found in critical condition, struck with a metal rod torn from her bed frame.
My name is Karen Epley. On January 4th, 1974, I was attacked and left for dead.
Ted Bundy's first victim?
I believe so, yes. One of the only that survived. I was living in the U District, studying political science. He came into my home, took a bed frame off of my bed, and smashed my skull. And he used probably the same bed frame, smashed it into my vagina and into my bladder. My bladder was totally split, so it was horrible. My roommate, Bob, thought I was still sleeping. Later on, he went down and checked me again, and there he found the blood, and it was just horrible for him to find me that way. And the next thing I remember was waking up in the hospital, and I thought, uh-oh, this is really bad. And so I asked my father, I said, Dad, what happened? And he said, well, you had a little bump in your head.
A month later, a senior in Chinese and host of an early morning radio ski report, Linda Ann Healy vanished without a trace from her university dorm. Only bloodstains remained on the bed sheets, and part of her remains, about a year after her disappearance, would be found on Taylor Mountain, east of Seattle, Washington. 2 months later, evening of March 12, 1974, Evergreen State College in Olympia, Washington, freshman Donna Gail Manson, to attend a campus jazz concert, left her dormitory room, walking down a dark campus path without streetlight. Her footsteps stopped for good that night. Cases occurred one after another, but scattered across jurisdictions, they were not connected. As months passed, June arrived. Early hours of June 11, this time in a narrow alley near the University of Washington dorms, a key participant in the local Daffodil Festival, 18-year-old Jorgen Hawkins, was walking toward her dormitory. A man spoke in the dark, and she suddenly vanished after that night. June 17, Lake Sammamish State Park, a man with a white arm cast approached young women to help move luggage. Probation officer Janice Ott and student Denise Naslund disappeared from the park that day. Later, in witness statements, a tan Volkswagen Beetle and the name Ted repeatedly appeared. The King County Sheriff's Office, in charge of investigation, made little progress. Around March 1975, a valley on Taylor Mountain, in the rough brush, damaged remains like women's skulls and jawbones were found. The King County Medical Examiner's Office secured the scene and began investigating. Later, through forensic identification, the remains were identified as UW Chinese major senior Linda Ann Healy, University of Washington students Jorgen Hawkins, Central Washington State College student Susan Elaine Rancourt, college student Roberta Kathleen Parks from Corvallis, Oregon, and Brenda Carol Ball. But for these remains to the previous serial disappearances to be officially connected, more time was required. During the same period, Ted Bundy left Washington State and moved to Salt Lake City, Utah. Then enrolling in the University of Utah Law School, he stayed there and continued his life. October 2, holiday near Salt Lake City, Utah. 16-year-old high schooler Nancy Wilcox disappeared after being seen near her home. Less than a month later, Halloween night, October 31, a road near a park in Murray, Utah, leaving her friends and walking alone toward a convenience store. 17-year-old Laura Ann Aim vanished without a trace. About 20 days later, she would be found by American Fork Canyon River. The Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office received reports of successive disappearances. In the U.S. at the time, across state lines, no computer network existed to share crime information in real time. Consequently, with the similar disappearances in Washington state, the investigation proceeded without any connection, as investigative records and data were individually organized. The commonly repeated object was a Volkswagen Beetle. From an outside view, the passenger seat space looked empty. Inside the vehicle, only the driver's seat was confirmed in a peculiar structure. However, whether investigators then directly checked inside the vehicle is unclear in records. Given investigative practices where cases involving missing person vehicles rarely ended with just an exterior check, the interior was highly likely exposed during the inspection process. Even if checked inside, it was a time with no comparable case data. The structure with the passenger seat removed is presumed to be viewed as a peculiar personal modification. The vehicle's connection to crime, a year later during the Utah arrests, would only be revealed after the vehicle was seized. November 8, 1974, a shopping mall parking lot in Murray, Utah, who just graduated high school and worked as a mall clerk. 18-year-old Carol DaRonch was shown a police badge by a man. Hearing that someone tried to break into her car, she followed him into the passenger seat of a Volkswagen Beetle.
A man approached me and said, "Is your license plate KADL32?" And I said yes. And he introduced himself as Officer Roseland. And he said that someone had been caught trying to break into my car.
And then this is where we came out of, right here, and walked through this parking lot.
I told him there was nothing missing, and he...
During the drive, the man used a weapon to threaten her, so she pushed open the passenger door, threw herself out, and barely escaped. That night, a high school parking lot in Bountiful, 30 minutes from Murray, Deborah Kent, leaving after watching a play, disappeared. On the asphalt, a single handcuffed key was left lying alone. The Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office recovered the key, but she did not return. January 12, 1975, a ski resort in Aspen, Colorado. Karen Campbell, a 23-year-old ordinary nurse on vacation with her fiancé, vanished after heading to the room hallway from the lobby to get something. A few months later, by Pickens County investigators, the skull of the remains found in a nearby hill showed clear signs of a depressed fracture, but coordination among Washington, Utah, and Colorado agencies had not yet been established. The pattern of roaming near similar crime scenes with the same car unchanged. The trail of the pursuit was cut off every time the jurisdiction changed. Early hours of August 16, 1975, outskirts of Granger, Utah, a Volkswagen Beetle speeding with its headlights off was spotted by Utah Highway Patrol Officer Bob Hayward. Finding it suspicious, the officer signaled it to stop, but the car ignored it, turned into an alley, and stopped only at a dead end. The approaching officer's gaze turned to the face through the driver's window, and inside the car of this man, who identified as Ted Bundy, the passenger seat was missing. On the floor, a crowbar and stockings with eye holes cut out were scattered. 2 days later from the seized car, a weapon, 2 pairs of handcuffs, and thick plaster cast flame poured out. Released on bail, Ted Bundy sold the car, but investigators found the buyer and dismantled the body, lifting the carpet, presumably used to load a body. The bare metal floor and 4 missing C-ticks in both holes were revealed, which exactly matched the car with an empty passenger seat in past case records. Re-examining past unsolved kidnapping case records, the Bureau, from a Volkswagen with its passenger seat removed a year ago, tricked into boarding by Ted Bundy with a fake police badge but barely escaping. Located and urgently summoned survivor Carol DaRonch, the lineup room of the Utah 3rd District Court, among several male suspects. Her fingertip pointed precisely at Ted Bundy. June 7, 1977, the courthouse in Aspen, Colorado. Preparing for the Karen Campbell murder trial, Ted Bundy was in the second-floor library. At the moment, the guards were changing shifts. Taking advantage of a temporary lapse in surveillance, he opened a window, jumped down to the lawn, and fled. The Pickens County Sheriff's Office immediately deployed search teams, but he had already escaped into the mountains outside Aspen. However, 6 days later, coming down to town in a starving state, driving a stolen car, he was spotted by patrolling police and rearrested on the spot. Afterward, he was transferred to Glenwood Springs Jail. For months, Ted Bundy intentionally left his delivered meals, and his weight quickly dropped by 7 kg. Measuring only about 30 cm by 30 cm, the purpose was to fit his frame through the cell ceiling vents. On the night of December 30, 1977, Ted Bundy pushed his slim body into the vent hole and entered the space inside the ceiling. Crawling along the narrow passage above the structure, he broke through the jailer's quarter ceiling, came down, and exited the main gate. The next morning, what the guards faced was just Ted Bundy's empty bed and the torn open ceiling hole. Succeeding in escaping once again, he began moving, using a vehicle stolen near the jail. Later passing through Detroit, Michigan, he transferred between trains and buses, moving south to Florida. The FBI's pursuit network expanded along state lines. The media across the U.S. covered the twice-escaped murder suspect's flight and the investigation's progress. Ted Bundy arrived in Tallahassee, Florida, using the alias Chris Higgin. He rented an apartment near Florida State University, where he was seen outwardly as a quiet and neat figure. 3 a.m., January 15, 1978, Tallahassee, Florida. The old lock of the Florida State University Chi Omega sorority house opened. At the end of the silent hallway, in the first bedroom, an FSU art history senior, Margaret Bowman, was struck on the head with a long weapon and killed. Soon after, in the next room, majoring in fashion merchandising, sophomore Lisa Levy was also attacked while defenseless. Tallahassee police forensics results showed on her body surface, heavily bitten by the killer's teeth. Bite marks clearly leaving the upper and lower alignment shape were found. The attacks continued along the dorm floor. 2 female students were found inside their rooms with severe injuries. The intruder escaped the sorority house and fled outside. A few blocks away, the home of another FSU student, Cheryl Thomas, wore the next path. The same weapon was wielded, leaving her severely injured on the scene. From the floor of the house, a stocking mask with only the eyes cut out was recovered.
I had 5 skull fractures and multiple contusions in my head. And because of the skull fractures, the 8th nerve was damaged and I lost the hearing in my left ear and the equilibrium. And I had a broken jaw and my left shoulder was pulled out of joint.
The Tallahassee Police Department collected bodily fluid traces from the mask surface and secured the teeth marks left on the victims' bodies via photos and plaster casts. As a result of the events that unfolded for an hour between 3 and 4 a.m., 2 died at the sorority house and 1 was severely injured at the nearby home. The mask recovered from the scene and especially the teeth mark alignment, which varies by individual, through precise analysis by forensic scientists, became key physical evidence heading to court. On February 9, 1978, after dismissal hours at Lake City Junior High School in Florida, 12-year-old Kimberly Leach went missing. According to witnesses, a white van loitering near the school was last spotted by a school staff member, and Kimberly Leach never returned. Ted Bundy traveled all over Florida, committing crimes while changing stolen cars' license plates. Inside the stolen vehicle secured by Florida Highway Patrol and investigators, from the driver's seat, a small fiber from Kimberly Leach's clothing was detected. Early hours of February 15, 1978, a road outside Pensacola, Florida. A Pensacola Police Department patrol car ran the license plate of a driving Volkswagen and found it was stolen. As the patrol car blocked the vehicle fleeing into an alley, ignoring the stop signal, the vehicle finally came to a stop. The driver's door opened and Ted Bundy tried to flee, but his officer, David Lee, pursued. He was arrested on the scene shortly after. Ted Bundy claimed his alias Kenneth Messner, but ID and credit cards under other names poured out from his pocket. Ted Bundy, who was on the FBI's most wanted list, after his arrest that day, never walked out of a detention facility again. July 1979, the 11th Judicial Circuit Court in Miami, Florida. Defendant Ted Bundy of the Chi Omega sorority murder case sat at the defense table and faced the jury. The court proceedings were broadcast nationwide through the media. The bite marks and teeth model left on victim Lisa Levy's body were presented as court evidence through forensic scientist Richard Suviron. The second right incisor was asymmetrically twisted inward as a result of matching the model over photos of the victim's skin. The teeth alignment and wound shape were shown to match. On July 24, the jury returned a guilty verdict and a death sentence was handed down. Ted Bundy remarked to the effect that this court would see him again. Afterward, appeals procedures to delay the execution followed. During years of ongoing appeal, investigative records scattered nationwide began to be organized into one. Taylor Mountain in Washington State, the hills of Aspen, Colorado, and the remains found at multiple locations in Utah were reviewed for connections during the investigative analysis. In April 1978, at Pigsty site near Lake City, Florida, the remains of Kimberly Leach were found, and her identity was confirmed through forensic comparison. In the following trial, he was sentenced to death once again. In 1984, the Florida Supreme Court finally recognized the legal validity of the bite mark evidence, and the execution date was finalized for January 1989. FBI investigators visited his cell. In the final interview record, Ted Bundy left the number 30, and the possibility of the actual victims being more was mentioned on the evening of January 23, 1989, near the Bradford County Prison in Florida. Large crowds and media reporters gathered ahead of the execution. Some crowds held pro-execution chants and signs, making the scene chaotic. Following the execution at 7:16 a.m. the next day, the case investigations that spanned from 1974 to 1978 were officially closed.
You are not guilty.
I'm not guilty. Does that include the time I stole a comic book when I was 5 years old? I am not guilty of the charges which have been filed against me.
And the allegation.
And I'll tell you, as long as they attempt to keep their heads in the sand about me, there's going to be people turning up in canyons, and there are going to be people being shot in Salt Lake City because the police there aren't willing to accept what I think they know, and they know that I didn't do these things. You know, I'm perfectly happy with the person I am, and I've always been.
People feared monsters, but what he offered was a police badge and a hand asking for small help. The trust connecting the community became the most perfect disguise. An unsuspected normalcy evaded the pursuit network for years. Ultimately, the most dangerous malice is not a foreign fear, but wearing the most familiar face of trust, leaving a mark in U.S. crime history.